Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Since you guys are so new, maybe what we do is something a little different. So yesterday I sent out our subject property that we all could use. So what I'll do is we'll go through those details. And then we can start going through and building the offer. And I've actually already completed one. But why don't we do this? I'm gonna put in the chat in case you don't have my email or however, Arnie, you probably got it on Slack.
I did. Oh, Slack's where to find it, but
I think you guys use Slack to communicate I think Dawn sends it to you. Hold on a second.
I got mine. Where did I get mine from? Hold on.
I'm just super old school and I'm sitting here with notes.
Paper. I love paper.
Yeah, me too. Just hanging out. I thought I just put all in binders.
So what I put in the chat is what I actually sent to folks yesterday. And I'm going to bring it up myself.
Okay.
Oops, that's not it. Oh, not it. Here we go. You guys see?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So our subject property, I always like to use a Keller Williams agent, one of their listings, so I can call them and they won't get upset that I'm calling them for some background scoop on the subject.
For sure.
But our property today is at 2714 Lorraine Avenue. So I'm just going to go into MLS and I hyperlinked it. You can search in MLS through the address, or you can search through, maybe you won't be able to search at all. Let's relog in. You can search through the MLS number or the address.
There you go. That's my first question for you. So really that MLS number, if someone wants to put an offer in on a property, you're not going to know that. You're going to type in the address and then you'll find the MLS number.
Yeah. Yep. And usually what I do is I print this page out of MLS, the private remarks version, and I bring a copy of this to my showing. Right. So I'll have all that information. Here's the MLS number up here. But let's just quickly go through. Let's go through MLS. So, and Arnie, this might be a little bit of a refresher from Accelerator last week. But over here, the layout of MLS is the same for everybody. And it's always going to have county, price, tax information over here, number of beds, baths, garage. Over here, it's always the square footage. Make sure you look at anything that's above grade, which means above the basement. And then here's what's below. So sometimes this total square footage is deceiving if this listing agent hasn't distinguished or differentiated the below grade. Here's how many days on market it's been. It's not on a floodplain. So over here, you've got the dimensions for the rooms that the listing agent has inputted. I always tell people, this came up yesterday in a showing, like I have buyers that they just bought like a brand new California king size bed. And if the primary bedroom doesn't fit their new bed, then they don't want to look at the house. So I always tell buyers, like, use this information with a grain of salt. Like, it's really up to them to come and measure because these things could be incorrect. But then here's just some of the things that are included in terms of descriptors for the house, like the exterior type, how it's heated. Things that are important for you writing an offer is to understand the type of municipality it's in, if it's in city, state, or a city, town, village. Here's the type of water and waste that it's on. So this is on city water, city sewer. Some information about the appliances that are included and whatnot. I'm not going to read through this. This is the marketing description. I just realized I'm not sharing my screen, am I?
Yeah, you are.
You are.
Oh, I am. Okay.
Yeah.
It just says share. Okay, that's
All
so
good.
interesting.
I have my phone up because I can't read the remarks, so I'm looking at it on my phone.
Oh, okay. The thing that I always wanted to take a specific look at are private remarks. Because you can learn a little bit about what the seller might have in terms of preferences for closing deadlines or review for binding acceptance. But here it says, please call or text the agent before submitting an offer, allow 48 hours for binding acceptance. Note in the offer, seller is a licensed broker of Wisconsin, earnest money is held at land title, room size not verified. So all of this information is important. And here you've got the listing agent's information. And here it also indicates that the seller's not offering concessions. So concessions are different than commission. Concessions, think of concessions as a bucket of money, like a closing cost credit that the seller is potentially willing to give the buyer. The buyer has the right to choose how they want to spend that money. They can choose to pay you or not. When I called the listing agent for this property, I called Melissa yesterday and I said, I see in private remarks, you want 48 hours binding acceptance. Is there anything that your seller is looking for in terms of closing, like a preferred closing date? She's like, well, we've been on the market for a long time. So she's like sooner versus later, but we're flexible. And then I also asked, is the seller willing to offer compensation to the buyer's agent? And she said, yes, they are. And I said, great. So we'll talk about that in a second. So based on all this information, what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go over to our offer practice. And I see somebody else join. I just need to see who joined. Hi, Charmaine. Okay. So our profile is our buyers. We're going to use another brewer. We're going to work with Willie Adamas because he's fantastic. And we're getting close to postseason baseball, which is exciting. So Willie signed a buyer agency with us on September 1st, which is important. That makes him a client. So that will have to be noted in our offer. He signed a buyer agency agreement with us back on September 1st. It's valid for 120 days. And in that buyer agency agreement, he indicated that he agreed to your compensation amount of 2.4%. So this is going to come in very important in a second. His closing time frame is flexible. He does want to have a home inspection and a radon inspection. He's got cash on hand ready for earnest money, appraisal gap, and or an inspection coverage. He's looking to us, his agent, to tell him, how do we want to do this? How do we want to split up that money? And we are pre-approved, or Willie's pre-approved for up to $250,000 for a 30-year conventional loan. He's going to put 8% down, and we're going to use a mortgage rate of 6.5%. Now, these are all things that you're going to learn about, especially the financing. You're going to learn during your buyer consultation, where they are in the pre-approval process. But then over time, you're going to learn, you will also know during your buyer consultation whether or not the buyer is going to be signing buyer agency or disclosure to customer. Let's make some assumptions for the offer just to make it easy breezy for everybody. So after calling the listing agent, you learned a little bit more about the seller preferences. So the seller is offering cooperative compensation, but they're not offering 2.4%. They're offering 2.3%. She has a compensation agreement that can be signed before the offer is submitted. So if you as the buyer's agent want to sign a compensation agreement beforehand, that is her preference. And therefore you would not necessarily have to write it into the offer. And we have all these contract trainings from August. If folks didn't get a chance to see them, there were, I think, 3 Mondays in a row where all of our offer practice or contract practice was based on these new compensation agreements and how to treat it in the offer. So I'm not going to go into deep dives on that because it's been covered in numerous places, and it's been covered a lot in the new normal conversations that were happening daily at 8:30 in the morning in August. So those are all on YouTube that you guys can check out. 48 hours for binding acceptance, closing is flexible again, sooner versus later. Something too, and actually she changed this since yesterday. In private remarks, she put that land earnest money is to be held at land title. So that's something that I probably would have added in here too. So for our offer, we're just gonna make things really easy. Everybody, if you're gonna do offer practice, and I will talk about that in a second, we're all gonna offer the asking, what they're asking. We are gonna use, or your buyer is okay using the, or moving forward, writing in the inclusions that were offered on MLS and the exclusions that were offered on MLS. We are gonna put down 2% for earnest money. And then based on Willie's information above, we're gonna have a home inspection, radon inspection. We'll give the seller the right to cure. He has, again, a few dollars up here. He had $75,000 in cash that he said he could use for earnest money appraisal gap or inspection.
7,500.
7,500, yep. So 2% of purchase price is going to be earnest money, and we'll go through that amount in a second. He's got $1,000 if he wants to use it at some point in time to cover inspection. And then he's got $2,000 out of that 7,500. This is how I'm kind of allocating the money. $2,000 for an appraisal gap. So I'm going to cover this and let's talk a little bit about it. So Willie signed the buyer agency agreement indicating he was going to pay, or he was willing to compensate you 2.4%. But we know after having conversations with our listing agent, the listing agent said, you can sign the compensation agreement ahead of time. It's 2.3%. Don't put it in the offer. Just send me the compensation agreement ahead of time. What do you think you would do? Because we're a little bit off. Your buyer agency agreement was for 2.4%. Seller's willing to pay 2.3%. What do you think the options are here for you as the buyer's agent?
Tell them it's 0.1%.
Tell who it's 0.1%.
Willie, put that in Willie's contract. He's paying 0.1%.
Yeah. What if Willie didn't have the money?
I mean, hashing it out. It says he has $7,500 in cash.
Yep.
So I mean, hashing it out, if I'm doing the math right, he should be able to take care of that 0.1%.
Yeah.
I believe. And since he did sign that that he agreed to the 2.4, I mean, I don't think it would be like too big of a pull, would it?
No. Great. Right. So
Okay.
here's when I agree with holding up our 2.4% agreement, right?
Yeah.
So you could try to ask the seller to pay for the 2.4%. It might make your offer a little bit less attractive. And if you're in competition with others, you might even have some buyers that aren't even asking the seller to cover it. Maybe your buyer can cover it. At the end of the day, I took a look at what is the difference between 2.4% and 2.3%. And it's $239.60. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's really not that a lot of money. Depending on your buyer, we know that Willie has some cash on hand right now. What we need to make sure that Willie understands is we are going to honor, if we go the route where we are going to get our full 2.4%, we have to notify Willie, right? Like we're going to get 2.3 from the seller. But I will ask you at the time of close to make up the difference per our compensation or per our buyer agency agreement of 2.4%. So Willie, at closing, you're going to have to come with extra cash of $239.60. I probably wouldn't even ask for it. And I would amend my buyer agency agreement just for this property to 2.3%. At the end of the day, like to me, it's now, if the difference was greater Now we're starting to see some people do offer 2%, right? And there could be, depending on the price point of the home, there could be quite a difference between 2.4% and 2%. But this is where you really are, as you're building your relationship with your buyer, you should be starting to understand maybe what your buyer might be comfortable doing and what you might be comfortable doing as well. For me, I might not even ask for the $239. I might just amend for this property, amend my buyer agency. But what I want to make sure people understand is that in this situation, we, after having conversations with the listing agent said the seller was willing to offer compensation to the buyer's agent. There's two ways that you could make sure that you get that compensation amount in writing. One is you can sign a compensation agreement ahead of time, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. You need to send that before the offer is submitted. And if your offer is accepted, that document goes into effect. Another way, if there is no compensation agreement that the listing agent has provided, another way you could do this is write it into the offer. And there's a section at the very end that also, though, adds another contingency to your offer. So again, there's tons of training in the month of August that was all about these new documents and how you can manage them. I will send to you guys later this afternoon links to some of those videos so you know how, or you have easy reference to them. I just want to make sure somebody came on and then somebody left.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to get right into zip forms, and I have already, let's go here. I've already started my offer. Because what I found in these offer practices, starting from scratch, it's really hard to get through it. So I've already started a draft, and I'm going to go through this fast. Okay. Because we have 39 minutes to get through it, but I'm just going to get right into the document. So this isn't zip form training. We have other training on that. What I'm going to do though is open up the biggie, and that is our offer to purchase document. Okay. So right off the bat, I have to put in today's date, or at least today's date, because that's the date I'm drafting the offer. And because he has signed the buyer agency agreement with us, that means we are his agent. He is our client. So I have left agent of buyer open, and I have struck out agent of seller listing firm or agent of buyer and seller. What if Billy or Willie didn't sign a buyer agency agreement with us and he signed a disclosure to customer? What would that mean?
I don't know.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
If he signs a disclosure to customer, that means you are not able to give him any recommendations or opinions. You are working as a sub-agent of the seller.
Okay.
Now, you can still write an offer as a sub-agent. The only times you can write offers for buyers are if they've signed a buyer agency agreement or if they've signed a disclosure to customer. We have a new form now, a pre-agency form that might be used when people are just meeting buyers for the first time and they need to go show them a house. That's all that document allows them to do, is to show them properties. It says on the document, the agent cannot write any offers. So the only time you can write an offer for a buyer is if they sign a buyer agency agreement or a disclosure to customer. But Willie is our guy. We're his agent. We are the agent of the buyer. I've crossed this out. I'm putting Willie's name here in line 3, and then I've just started to plug in the address. In line 6, it's really important that you understand what type of municipality the home falls in. So here, our address is 2414 Lorraine Avenue. It's in the blank of blank. It's in the city of Racine. It could be in the village of Thiensville or the town of Pewaukee. You find that information out by going, if you don't know offhand, it's in MLS. It tells you what type of municipality it is. So we've got this here in the city of Racine, and it's in the county of Racine. And if you don't know what county the property falls in, go back to MLS and it tells you right at the top. Okay. Next, based on our offer parameters, we're just gonna offer what they're asking, 239.9. All you have to do is type in 239.9 in this field and it'll automatically populate the words for the purchase price. Next up are the inclusions. So these are the things that we want to make sure the seller leaves behind for the buyer at the time of closing. And you can see here in MLS, inclusions. This is what the seller has said that they are willing to leave behind. Maybe your buyer doesn't want the washer or dryer. And if that's the case, you don't write it in as an inclusion. You would write it as an exclusion. But based on our offer one sheet, we're just gonna follow everything based on how MLS is stated. So we're gonna literally, I took this, I copied it and I plugged it into this line here. Not included in the purchase price. Again, exclusions are listed in MLS. If you're not quite sure, pick up the phone and call the listing agent and we'll just say, Willie agrees, he doesn't want the seller's personal property. But if there are other things that Willie really doesn't want, what if there's a pool table or an extra freezer in the garage? If your buyer doesn't want something left behind, put it as an exclusion. Then the next line we have to fill out is binding acceptance. So this is the deadline that we are asking the seller to review and accept and send back our offer by. And we know based on what it said in MLS that they want 48 hours to review. Sometimes you'll see 24 hours. Sometimes listing agents will say, you know what, we're going to be reviewing offers at this time on this day. This is really up to you to determine as the buyer's agent what you want to do. Even if the seller is asking for maybe 48 hours, you could challenge them on that. If you have a great offer, maybe you say, you know what, I'm only going to give you 12 hours to review because I think this offer is great. It's totally up to the buyer's agent and the buyer to determine how they want to do this. Sometimes if you create an expedited timeline or time frame, it can really irk the seller. So just be careful, but sometimes that's part of people's strategy.
What do you find, Kim, is kind of like, given the market right now, what is like appropriate? Just kind of like following in line with the
I usually
seller?
do what the sellers want.
Okay.
Yeah. So every deadline runs through 11:59 p.m. on the date specified in the offer. If you don't want to give 48 hours, say maybe you want to hear back by 3 p.m. on Friday. That's fine. Just put 3 p.m. Otherwise, if you don't specify a time, it automatically goes through 11:59 of that date. Now, again, part of your strategy with your buyer is to find out, okay, when do you want to close? Like, let's make sure too, you're in town and ready to close on that day. We know that the seller wanted to close as soon as possible. We know also our buyer was flexible with his closing time frame. So I've just listed here October 31st. You know, closing timeframes now can be anywhere as fast as 14 days, even if it's financed. I would say the average now is a 30-day close. 2-3 years ago, 30-day closes were very, very fast. But we are like well-oiled machines now, and lenders and buyers agents know that if you need to have an expedited time frame, it can get done, but all parties have to be working together to ensure that they can achieve that deadline. So I've just listed here October 31st. I took a look at the calendar. It's not a weekend. End of the month seemed exciting to me, and it's Halloween. So maybe we show up to closing dressed as, I don't know, a mummy. Our documents, I believe, automatically put at the place selected by the seller or at the buyer, by the buyer. So I've crossed out here at the place selected by the seller because then we would be countering each other here on the document. On the top of page 2, you're gonna find that zip forms doesn't automatically carry through the city, state, or zip code. So all you have to do is, and you need to make sure that your address is at the top of every single line or every single page of your document. You just have to go in and input it once. Once you do it once, then we just do a double check and it's automatically put it on page 3. Okay.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So this is second time. I couldn't do it last week in class either. I cannot put NA in that area. You have NA. It's not allowed.
I didn't put it in there. It automatically was in there.
Okay, because it's not, I'm not able to.
Yeah, I would ask Kathleen. I think Kathleen is your tech person.
Okay.
It's okay if you can't put it in there, because if you put something on this line for earnest money, that's fine.
Okay.
And the majority of the time, you're not gonna send earnest money. You're not gonna deliver earnest money with your offer. So earnest money here, we said that Willie was gonna give 2% earnest money, 2% of the purchase price. In our market, I think it's most common to see earnest money between 1 to 3% of the purchase price. I know last week in Accelerator, Steph Conard mentioned it could be 1 to 5%. You know, it's really part of your strategy. If you want to give more money as part of earnest money, your buyer certainly can. Your buyer also, though, needs to make sure that they have that money on hand, because it will need to be deposited within X amount of days, and it will be taken out of their checking account or whatever account they're using to fund it. It will be taken out immediately.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So is this one of those moments where like it's kind of circumstantial because this property's been sitting for 34 days versus like if it was like, oh hey, this is hot, because I mean on Redfin it says like 29% of houses in this market go in a certain amount of time. So like to me, I'd be sitting there going, 34 days, that's not normal. I would not really think like, hey, let's push the earnest money, just do what you can.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
And what I didn't
That's a
say at the
strategy
beginning of
type
this,
thing.
yeah, yeah, that's all part of your strategy. Yes.
Okay.
Earnest money is a lever you can pull one way or another, depending on the market conditions, the competition, and what your buyer feels comfortable doing. So
Okay.
one thing to know, this is not competitive offer practice. That
Okay.
there are so many different ways that you could slice and dice and draft an offer. This is literally, we're just doing blocking and tackling. But yes,
Okay.
Emily, that is totally something that you should be thinking about.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I've just said 2% here. We're gonna have it, it can be mailed commercially, electronically, or personally delivered within 5 days. Now, something to coach your buyers on. I would never coach my buyer to actually put the earnest money in the mail. I just wouldn't. We've seen enough situations where checks get lost, checks are intercepted, and it's just bad news. I would, if your buyer isn't comfortable using trust funds, which is a wire or an electronic form of withdrawal and deposit that can be done through MLS. If they're not comfortable doing that, and there's an $8 fee, then I would actually have the buyer drop off the earnest money at the location of the firm who is keeping it. A lot of times the listing agent and their firm holds the money into a trust account. I've left this blank because Melissa, our listing agent, indicated that the seller wants earnest money to be held by land title. So I'm gonna strike through listing firm and drafting firm. And I'm gonna put here land title. And I should have asked Melissa when I talked to her, what's the address of land title? Because I would put it right in my offer. So let's just pretend land title 123 Main Street, Milwaukee. And if you don't know who's holding the earnest money, pick up the phone and ask. It's totally fine. I'm going to scroll down. I'm not going into this line by line. We have so many YouTube videos on contract training that literally will break the offer down into sections and do deep dives. So please, if you have specific questions or you want to go and learn a little bit more about the inspection contingency section or financing, we have so many YouTube videos on contract training, but also just start reading the contracts. All of the answers to questions are already in the contract. It's just a matter of familiarizing yourselves and getting comfortable and confident with what's in the document.
1 second.
So the thing here in terms of the condition report, so a seller is required by the state to fill out a condition report. If the seller hasn't lived in the property, maybe they're a trust or a personal representative, they aren't obligated to. Sometimes sellers refuse to fill out a condition report. What this section of the offer represents is that the seller has provided a buyer a condition report, and we have to look at when that condition report was dated, and we put it here in the offer, and I'll show you how to get that date. This doesn't mean that the buyer agrees with what's on the condition report. It just indicates that the buyer acknowledges that a condition report was provided. So you've got to put a date here. And if you go back to MLS, in the documents, here are all the documents that the listing agent has uploaded. So here's our condition report. Condition report was dated August 20th. That's the date I'm going to be putting in the offer. I'm also, when I'm in MLS and I pull this up, I'm going to download the condition report and the lead paint addendum, because those are documents that your buyers are going to have to sign, and you'll have to upload them into Command. So just a little tip. So I'm going to go back to my offer, and I put here that the condition report was dated August 20th. Now, page 3 is a real easy page because we don't have to fill anything out. It just indicates the types of conditions that a seller needs to make sure that they note on their condition report if they're aware of any of them. So I'm going to skip on down to the top of page 4. Here's where we're getting into our first contingencies. And the first one right out of the gate is the home inspection. So we know that Willie, our buyer, wants to have a home inspection. He also wants to have a radon inspection. But when we check the box in 193, this means that our offer is contingent upon Willie having a home inspection. And in this section, it indicates that the home inspection has to be performed by a licensed home inspector. Can't be like Willie's uncle who thinks he's good at DIY. It has to be by a licensed home inspector. If there were things in the home that you knew even as you were going through a showing that you saw, you know what, that chimney looks really rough, or you know what, the roof looks bad. If you already want to have a chimney or a roof or whatever type of expert come in addition to your home inspector, you would list that type of inspector here. So maybe you put roof, chimney, something. But what this offer automatically does is it gives the buyer the opportunity to have any type of follow-up inspections that might be written up in your home inspector's report. So maybe I have Joe Schmo home inspector, and they go through the house and they say, it looks like the basement walls are out of plumb, they're uneven by 3/4 of an inch. Home inspector recommends that a qualified basement and foundation expert comes in to look at it, right? Because a home inspector is not an expert in all of these things. So automatically, your buyer has the right to have those follow-up inspections. Now, what we need to do is indicate, when are we gonna have the home inspection completed, any follow-up inspections, and then when are we gonna negotiate any type of repairs or credits or whatnot? That's the time frame that we put here in line number 206. If you don't put anything in, it's automatically 15 days. And remember, anything in an offer is calendar day. It doesn't matter if it's a business day or calendar day. This means within 10 days, the contingency is deemed satisfied unless, after acceptance, they deliver to the seller a copy of the written inspection report after the date on line 1, which is today's date, and a written notice listing the defects identified in those reports. So what so many people don't realize is this isn't the deadline that you need to have the home inspection by. This is the deadline that you have to have the home inspection, any follow-up inspections, if you have to get estimates of repairs or work that has to get done. All of those things have to happen within this time frame, and you also need to be negotiating if your buyer wants anything repaired, fixed, or credited. That all has to be signed, sealed, delivered, and done within these 10 days. If you don't get that done and you let that contingency expire, your buyer could very well be on the hook to buy the house as is, depending on whether or not you gave the seller the right to cure. So in our market, it's still very much a seller's market. The majority of the buyers that are writing offers with home inspections, they give the seller the right to cure. Now, a way in which a seller could cure is a couple of different things. Let's use the roof example. Maybe the home inspector came, the roof was bad, the buyer had a follow-up inspection done by a roof expert, and the roof expert said, it's gonna be $10,000 to have a brand new roof put on. So you're talking to your buyer and you ask, like, is that something important to you? Is that something that you want the seller to fix? Is that something that you want, if you do want them to fix it, do you want them to fix it before closing? Do you want them to just give you a credit of $10,000 or maybe adjust the purchase price $10,000 and you do the work after close? Those are all things that you need to be discussing with your buyer to understand how you want to satisfy the home inspection contingency. So your buyers are going to be looking at you for advice. And when you get a home inspection report, and I don't know if anyone's gotten one recently, but usually the home inspection report, it's 20 to 40 pages long, and people think, oh my gosh, the house is falling down. But it's not. The home inspector is going in and organizing his results in a couple of different categories: defects, deferred maintenance, and maybe like plan accordingly. Maybe like the furnace is old, plan accordingly, you might have to buy a new one. Your buyer really only has the opportunity to focus on defects, things that are broken, structurally impacts the safety of inhabitants. Like you can't, if somebody says, the furnace is old. Well, the furnace is old, but it's working. It's not broken. So we have many, and we actually have a one sheet on our website that talk all about, like, here are some great resources to learn more about the home inspection contingency. Please familiarize yourself with it, because I can't tell you, and everybody right now in this market, new agents and even established agents, as home inspections become much more common in offers again, this is something that everybody is trying to navigate and needing extra confidence on. So we'll also, I know in PC and some of the offices coming up in the next few weeks, we'll be covering home inspections. But at the end of the day, if you need help, please call the contract helpline, call your compliance broker. They can help you kind of navigate those things. So in our offer, we're giving the seller the right to cure. So the seller can satisfy the contingency by a couple of different ways. Even before we get, if we're in this 10-day time period, what if our buyer decides, you know what, we'd really like the seller to give us a $10,000 credit for the roof, a $10,000 adjustment in purchase price for the roof, we'll take it on ourselves after closing. If you are having a nice open line of communication with your listing agent and you're going back and forth and talking about these are the things that the buyer is, most concerned about, we are going to be drafting an amendment indicating that we will ask the seller to drop the purchase price of $10,000 to cover the roof. Is that something you think your seller would accept? If they say yes, great, you draft an amendment, both parties sign. There might be a situation where in this time frame, you guys can't come to an agreement. And then it's a matter of how badly does your buyer want the house? And if you've given the right to cure to the seller and your buyer is like, you know what, there's too many things here. I don't feel comfortable fixing all of these things. I'll try one more time. I'll give the seller a list, a notice of all the things that we're asking them to do. And if the seller says no, then the deal's done. So this is where, again, like if you've got confusion around notices, amendments, timeframes, please, please, please ask questions, because this is a section where a lot of agents either aren't managing deadlines, and when you don't manage a deadline, your buyer might have just purchased the house as is, or you're not quite sure if you should be sending amendments versus notices. So always ask questions. With the radon test, a lot of home inspectors now can do radon testing at the same time as the home inspection. So when you're scheduling or when your buyer's scheduling the home inspection, a lot of times home inspectors will say, does it come with a radon test? You can certainly have the home inspector leave the radon test behind. They'll leave a kit in the basement. And I think that has to stay in the basement for 48 hours. The home inspector will go back and pick up the kit to read the radon levels. But usually this contingency follows the same time frame as the home inspection contingency. So I've checked the box yes, because we knew Willie wanted both a home inspection and a radon test. So the offer's contingent upon the buyer getting a report as to what's going on with the radon, and it's going to be paid for at this buyer's expense. That's usually what's happening right now in this market. If you don't strike buyer or seller, it automatically defaults to the buyer. So again, that's actually something too that you need to make sure that your buyer has money on hand to be able to pay for some of these things. Now, I followed the same time frame in terms of deadlines for the radon test, 10 days, as the home inspection. That was also 10 days. And then here, the right to cure. A lot of times, 99% of the times right now, buyers are giving the seller the right to cure radon as well. And usually the cure for radon, if the levels come back high, the seller cures by installing a radon mitigation system. They can cost between like $1,200 and $1,500. And usually that is done prior to closing. So it even says here, if the seller has the right to secure, seller may satisfy the contingency by delivering a notice stating they'll cure and installing a radon mitigation system in conformance with standards no later than 3 days before closing. Now, the offer is null and void if the buyer delivers a notice saying, hey, we want you to cure. Maybe the seller has the right to cure, but they decide they don't want to. Deal could be dead. Then it's up to your buyer as to whether or not they want to just continue to move forward. And then we're only gonna have time to get through the financing section, which is okay. What I always do is when it comes time to financing, I get out my mortgage calculator and I use Carl with a K. If you were in Arnie, this is the one we talked about last week, an accelerator. But it's handy to have some type of mortgage calculator on your phone because it'll help you fill in some of the blanks here. So if your buyer is getting a loan, you need to make sure that you check the box on line 248, meaning the offer is contingent upon the buyer being able to obtain a written blank loan. This is where you put the loan type. It could be a 30-year conventional, it could be a 15-year conventional, it could be an FHA, a VA, a WIDA loan. This is information that you should be getting from your buyer's lender and most likely would also be in a pre-approval letter. So based on our offer sheet, our offer instructions sheet, we knew that Willie was getting a 30-year loan. So I put that there. And then this number here in line 251, this is the number of days that we're giving ourselves to be able to satisfy the loan contingency by providing a loan commitment letter. So we've got a closing that's maybe like 36 days between now and October 31st. I would say if you aren't quite sure how fast your lender can get a loan commitment by, pick up the phone and ask the lender. Say, I'm drafting a letter for our mutual client, Willie, and I want to make my offer competitive. When I'd like to put 25 days in to get loan commitment, Mr. or Mrs. Lender, do you think that's a feasible time frame? And they'll say either yes or no. Maybe they'll say yes, and guess what? We can do it even faster. But I always verify with the lender the information that I'm putting in this section. Because the last thing you want to do is have a very quick deadline, and maybe your lender was never going to be able to meet that deadline from the get-go. So just confirm with your lender as to how fast things can get done. Usually if I'm closing in 30 days, I would put like a 21-day, maybe even like an 18-day financing commitment. But just for today, I put 25 since we're a little bit longer than 30. And the financing selected shall be in an amount of not less than blank. This amount here represents the offer price minus the down payment. So if you remember, we were offering $239,900. Willie is putting 8% down. So I've taken $239,900 minus 8%, which gives me a principal amount, which is the amount of money he's going to be getting a loan on, a principal of $220,000 and $220,708. Does everyone follow that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
The loan is going to be for a term of not less than 30 years, and it's amortized over 30 years. If he was getting a 15-year loan, you put 15 and 15. If he was getting an an adjustable rate mortgage, you would have something very different here. If you don't know what to put, call the lender. But usually these two lines here match, these two fields. Now, the monthly payment of principal and interest that Willie is going to get on his loan, if he puts 8% down, and he's paying a 6.5% interest rate, that amount every month of his principal plus interest is $13.95. So this is where in your mortgage calculator, that's where it comes in really handy. Again, this amount here just represents what he is going to be paying his mortgage broker or bank or whomever he's getting the loan from. That's what his loan plus interest is going to be. A lot of buyers see this number and think, oh my gosh, I have so much more money. I was budgeting more money every month. This is great. But what this doesn't include are things like property taxes that you're going to be responsible for paying every month, homeowners insurance, if there's PMI, So this states right here, buyer acknowledges that the lender's required monthly payments may also include a 12th, so monthly, of the estimated net taxes, hazard insurance, private mortgage and premiums, etc. If your buyer was buying down his or her mortgage rate with points, you would be putting in an amount here. I can't even put 0 here. It just doesn't allow me to, but it's 0 if you don't do anything. But again, you would know this if your buyer was buying down points, because it would be a discussion between you, the lender, and the buyer, and it most likely would even be on a pre-approval letter. Then we have to check one of these boxes on 264, 265 in terms of the type of rate we are going to be getting with our loan. And we are getting a fixed rate loan. We're getting a 30-year conventional loan, meaning the rate stays fixed. It stays the same for the duration of the loan. We put in our offer sheet that would be 6.5%. Call the lender and ask, where are interest rates right now? What do you think is a good rate for me to put in this offer? If you don't know what's going on with interest rates, I usually give myself a little bit of a cushion with interest rates, because they can fluctuate. Again, if you don't know, just ask the lender. Now, if your buyer was getting an adjustable rate mortgage or an ARM, their interest rate changes from year to year. And you would check this box and you would fill in the appropriate and the correct information that you would get from the lender here as it pertains to their adjustable rate mortgage. Okay, I'm going to end there because we only have about 4 minutes. This happens a lot in offer practice. We don't even get through the whole offer. So what I encourage people to do, if you can, fill in the rest of the offer based on the information and the instructions that I had dropped into the chat or that I had emailed yesterday. Just take your best shot and email it to me, and I can help you by providing feedback. If you're like, you know what, Kim, I have no idea where to even begin, let's set up some time and I can try to help go through this with you guys. Any initial questions? It's a lot, but this is why offer practice is so important, because the more that you do it, the more confident you are, and you'll be able to write an offer in 10 minutes. Like my first offer took me a couple hours because I was so nervous, but I had someone also there to review it for me. So if you do, as you start to get clients and you know that you're going out for a bunch of showings tomorrow, and you're thinking, you know, one of these actually might be a winner for my buyer, let your PC coach or let your compliance or let your helpline know and say, I'm going on showings tomorrow. Is somebody maybe going to be available to take a look at my offer before I submit it? Because I can't tell you how many times we have seen people not take advantage of that and they submit offers, and it's really at the detriment to their clients because they've been wrong. So don't do that.
Way easier the third time, by the way. This is my third time.
Yeah. Yes. More. I mean, again, like, you might not believe me, but the more practice that you do, the easier it becomes. And even if you want more practice besides this once a week, I'm happy to give people subject properties and give you feedback. I literally will go line by line and I will type up in an email, okay, here's overall feedback. Maybe do this in that line instead of this, or you forgot this. Like, the more practice you can do, the better. And I wish I would have been able to do much more practice at the beginning versus being thrown into something, because then I was like profusely sweating.